Peace and greetings. This is Artis, and this is the Artis Smith Yoga Podcast.
How did I become so how did I become so obsessed with yoga? How did I become how did it turn into my thing, you know? Well, I was raised in a spiritual household to a certain extent. My father is a minister. Uh he became a minister when he was in a household to a certain extent. My father is a minister. Uh he became a minister when he was 1 years old. Okay, he was 16 in 1940 something or another. Okay, so young black kid, 1940s in Arkansas, Mississippi. Use your imagination. Okay, a lot of turmoil, a lot of things going on. And so he was deciding, what he was going to do with his life at that particular time. He was in the church, but he was also in the streets. You know what I mean? He was doing what he had to do. So, and not in a illegal way type of thing. He was just working, working hard, trying to make things happen for his family, his mother. And so he was working in a field, and it was on a plantation, and they grew cotton and watermelon. And so there was a tractor that everybody was working on, and nobody could get the tractor to work. They couldn't get it to run. He himself had been working on it, all day long. A lot of other people working on it. They could not get this tractor to run. And again, as I was saying at the time, he was going through this emotional turmoil about where he wanted to go in his life, what he wanted to do. So he looked at the tractor and he started talking to God. And he said, God, if I walk over here and turn the ignition and this tractor starts up with no problems, I'm going to devote my life to becoming a minister. I'm going to devote my life to you. Again, keeping in mind that the tractor was broken. They were in the process of probably going to take it somewhere, strip it for parts. You know what I mean? He walks over, turns the key, and of course, it starts up just like that. And that's when he made the decision. It was already teetering. He was thinking about it, considering it, and that was the catalyst for him to become a minister. So he became a minister at 16, right? And is he's retired now, but you don't ever you don't ever really retire. You don't retire from spiritual work. You don't retire from being a minister. If someone comes to you with questions, and you're always going to help them. And he's still involved with a church in where he is right now in Georgia. So I grew up in that environment. He would preach on a Sunday morning. One of the biggest influences on me was the fact that he would preach on a Sunday morning, right? And then all throughout the week, that's how he would live his life. That's how he would work with us. That's how he was. He definitely practiced what he preached. And so I was very, I was open for, that spiritual situation. It was like I was into it when I was younger, really, really into it. As I got older, I started reading other books, looking at other things. And one of the things he told me when I started doing this, I started reading other books about religion and other different religions. And I went to him. I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm looking at all these other different religions and all." And I was honestly, and I said to him, I was like, "Am I going to hell for this?" And he looked at me and almost kind of laughed a little bit. He said, every man or woman has to find their own path to God. And when he told me that, it just allowed me to like, oh, okay, I'm not tied down. I can explore. I can explore. It's my decision. And so there's a, and I'm going to, I'll just say this, we are all on a spiritual journey, whether or not you want to admit it or not. We're all on a spiritual journey, right? The fact that you don't think you're on a spiritual journey, you're on a spiritual journey because you're thinking about it. But anyway, um, grew up in a Christian household, so I know, um, I know a lot of the Bible, you know, a lot of the stories, and so that's my foundation. It's a spiritual foundation, but without the without the dogma, although that looming threat of hell was always there. When you're a kid in church, they're always talking about, hey, if you don't do this, you don't do that, you're going to hell. That's kind of the thing that, like, that's one of the reasons why I separated from uh, that ideal, right? So, and I'll talk more about my thoughts on that in another video. So, moving right along, grew up in a Christian household, spiritual, and then when so we'll skip to when I started working. No, we'll skip to, let's see, the first, okay, the first, the physical. My sister was a gymnast when she was younger, for a short period of time, and she would come home and they had stretching exercises that they would do, and I later I later discovered that these stretching exercises that they were doing were very, very similar to yoga. And so when I was small, when I was a boy, we would do lotus, we would do headstands, we would do handstands, we would do a number of different stretching exercises that directly relate to yoga when I was a kid. So my body got kind of, and I enjoyed that kind of thing. And so fast forward to when I was in my, we'll say, how old was I? Probably my, has to be my early 20s, because I was working at this Indian restaurant. So it's called the Mogul. But before that, before the Mogul, a really close friend of mine, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to put his business out there in the streets, but when we took about, man, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hits of acid one night. And he had this book. It's called The Science of Self-Realization. So we took these like 2 or 3, I don't know, 4 or 5, I don't know how many hits of acid it was, but it was a lot. And so we took this acid and we started reading this book, and we started passing it back and forth and reading it and looking at it and reading, and we were just like overcome with this concept of self-realization. We were overcome with the concept of you doing the spiritual work yourself, you looking within yourself and doing that through meditation and through mantra. And so we had become very, very involved in it. So much to the effect that we had become vegetarians. Like both of us, we became, and our friends around us were like, what are you doing? What's going on with you guys? But, at that point we became vegetarians. And right along the same time that happened, an Indian restaurant opened up. And The Science of Self-Realization is a book that was written by a man named Srila Prabhupada, and he is a Indian guru. And so the book is heavily laden with Krishna ideals. It's not a religious book, but Krishna, he talks about Krishna in there, and so it's closely related to the Hindu faith. And so we get this, and so this Indian restaurant opens up, and for us it's a no-brainer. We're interested in the culture, so we're like, you know what, boom, let's go work, let's go apply at this Indian restaurant. Well, we got the job at the Indian restaurant. We were serving tables, and there we met one of the doctors who owned the Indian restaurant. And one of the doctors that owned the Indian restaurant also used yoga as part of his um, practice. His that he, he was a doctor, so he used yoga as part of the practice for some of his folks. And that was one of the first times I can remember hearing the word, or like remember hearing the word, because I know I heard it I heard it when I was younger, of course, but it was just in passing. But it stuck to me when I heard him talk about it. And then I put the two and two together with reading The Science of Self-Realization, the meditation, and he said yoga. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. And so I started, and I asked, we both, my friend and I were, asking him questions about it. And he pretty much kind of brushed us off. He said that you guys drink too much and you smoke too much. You can't do yoga. And so we were like, all right, whatever. It was still, it was in the back of my mind. I'm like, yoga. I'm interested in that. I want to know more about this yoga, but I never really acted on it. And so I'm at the Indian restaurant, and then fast forward again, I moved to Norfolk, Virginia. Well, first I moved to Newport News, and this is about how many years later from there to there? So we're talking about a time span of about maybe 7 or 8 years from the time of the Indian restaurant to the time I was about to move to Norfolk. And in between that time, I had some, read a few books about Buddhism and meditation. So I was really heavy into meditation. And so I moved to Norfolk, or Newport News, Virginia. I was a restaurant manager for Ruby Tuesdays. And I was doing my meditations in the morning sometimes, but not really heavy onto it. And then I moved to Norfolk. I moved from Newport News to Norfolk, in the Seven Cities area. When I moved to Norfolk, no, Virginia Beach first. I moved to Virginia Beach. I moved from Newport News to Virginia Beach. So I'm in Virginia Beach. And at the time, I'm going through this whole like, okay, I was a restaurant manager, but I really loved fine dining, cooking, haute cuisine, right? I did it when I was younger in Augusta, and I went to culinary school for a few years. When I moved to Virginia Beach in the Norfolk area, I went back to culinary school again, and I was also a restaurant manager. So I was really moving towards wanting to work in a fine dining establishment, in a Michelin star restaurant. That was my goal at the particular time. So I'm moving towards that. And then I get fired I get a job at one of the best restaurants in the area, and I get fired. And I'm heartbroken. I'm upset. I'm like, wow, the fuck, they fired me. What am I going to do? I wasn't worried about getting another job. I was worried about, okay, this is where I wanted to be, and I didn't live up to their standards. They fired me. And it hurt, you know what I mean? And so I went through a time for about 2 weeks. I had some money saved up, and so I was like, you know what? I didn't fall into a depression. I fell back onto myself. I said, okay, you know what? Let me really think about what it is that I really want out of life. Do I really want to pursue this career? Because I could have got a job at another restaurant and kept going. You know what I mean? Like that's just because it's one of the best restaurants in the area doesn't mean there's many restaurants, and there's a lot of different reasons why they fired me that I don't know about, and I'm not going to assume anything. You know what I mean? I'm just going to say that they fired me and that was it. So, but there was other places I could have worked, but I had to think about, what do I really want to do this? do I really want to spend, you know, um, all of my energy on doing this? What is the end game? What's the end goal? Why am I doing this? And I realized that I was doing it strictly for my ego. I enjoy cooking. I love to cook. I love making food for people. But the way I was going about it was strictly ego based. Like, I want people to know who I am. I want to be famous. I want to be a famous chef. I want to be recognized. I. That's where my mind was. And getting fired helped break that. It helped smash the ego. And so now I was in a open and vulnerable place and really able to understand, okay, where do I want to go with this? So after some time, my money started running out, right? So I had to get a job. I had to do something. And I started doing some day labor. And day labor is hard work, the type of work I was doing. And so there was this guy who was a brick mason, okay? And he was constructing this walkway out of brick. We went and did this, and what it was it was just grass from the curb up to the person's front door. And so he sat back, looked at it, designed a curved walkway from the street from the street to the front of the house. And then me and a few other guys, we and him dug a trench that was probably, I don't know, it was a whole length of the front yard. So we're talking about maybe um 30 or 40 feet, maybe 50 feet. I don't know. It's pretty long. So anyway, we dig this thing out, and then when we dig it out, we go behind it and we put in there's layers that you have to put in. So we put first sand, and then gravel, and then sand, and then gravel, and then something else, and then finally it was all level. And then we laid all the bricks, and then after, when we were finished, I could see the winding from him saying, "This is what we're going to do." I saw the sketch, and then we all did the work, dug it out, and plant. That was so powerful for me because it represented what I was going through at the time. It represented a whole reconstruction of a new path for me. That's what it did. It represented a whole reconstruction for a new path for me. So I went back to work at Applebee's. I was working at Applebee's, and I went back to work at Applebee's as a bartender. And I was just bartending, and I was just hanging loose for like a couple of weeks. I was like, okay, that didn't work out. I'm just gonna, it is what it is. And then I was reading some self-help material and I still like to read that stuff. It's so interesting, all of the different concepts. And I was listening to one person in particular. His name is Bob Proctor. He's one of my favorites. Peace and blessings be upon him, Bob Proctor. He was awesome. So he was talking one day about a subject. I was listening to a video that he put out, and in the video I heard the word Upanishads. He said, "Yeah, da 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 da," and this information comes from this ancient information. It comes from the Upanishads. And I was like, wait a minute. Immediately, when I heard him say Upanishads, a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, oh, the Upanishads. That has something to do with yoga. Yoga is, yeah, it was the thing that the doctors talked about. And then I thought about the book that I read with my friend, The Science of Self-Realization, and now yoga and meditation, how meditation is part of yoga. And I was like, wait a minute. Okay, and I had been doing a lot of meditation, sitting in meditation. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna look and find a yoga studio. I'm gonna go do some yoga. Before I even found a yoga studio, I went and bought a yoga mat. So I had a yoga mat. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to see what yoga is about. Atma Bodhi Yoga in Virginia Beach. I went to a class at 12 o'clock on June the 6th of 2013. 12 o'clock, noon. It was Cali. So I walk in the door and I'm like, hey, hello, da-da-da. My name is Artis, and I'm curious about yoga. What can you tell me? And she said, I can show you better than I can tell you. I got a class coming up in a few minutes. You're welcome to join it. I have my yoga mat. I had planned on coming to the class anyway, but she was like, you know what, let me just, and I was curious questions. She was like, just let me show you, which made a real big impression on me. I'm like, that's what I like. Okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's see what this is about. So we start the yoga class, or she starts the yoga class rather, and then we move into downward facing dog. Okay. Now there's an instruction. She instructed it. She was like, okay, press with your hands, spread your fingers wide, raise the seat to the sky, extend the heels towards the mat behind you. And then she said, look in between your legs. And when I put my head down and I looked in between my legs, a light bulb went off. Something happened in me. It, like everything was buzzing. And at that moment, on June the 6th of 2013 at noon, I knew that I was going to be doing this and teaching this for the rest of my life. I knew that was my calling. I realized this is my calling. Yoga is my calling. And so from that point, I immediately bought a month unlimited membership. At the time, I was working at Applebee's as a bartender. So those of you who know, and if you don't, bartenders' schedules can be moved around very easily because you got a lot of bartenders. Everybody's willing to pick up that bartender shift. That's an easy $200-$300 shift. You know what I mean? So everybody's willing to pick it up, and it's flexible. You mostly work at night. So I'm bartending. And so what I did was I scheduled my bartending around my yoga. So I would get up in the morning and go to class. I would take there was 2 classes in the morning. So I would take the 2 classes in the morning. I would come home, get a little something to eat, take a break, go take the 3 o'clock. It was like another class, and then go work at Applebee's, the night shift, and then get up in the morning and repeat. And when I didn't have to work, I was taking like 4 classes a day. I would just be at the studio all day long taking yoga classes because I had an unlimited membership, and I was just taking all of the classes. I had become obsessed, and I still am. From that time, from that day, that moment that I looked in between my legs for downward facing dog for the first time, I became obsessed then, and I am still obsessed now with yoga. I love it. I love it. And I've centered my focus. So the question was, why am I so interested in yoga? What got me into yoga? And that was it. From my sister showing me stretching when I was a kid, to working at the Indian restaurant with the doctors that taught yoga, and then to moving to Virginia Beach and going to Atma Bodhi Yoga, working with AJ, working with Cali, getting my teacher training done there. That's how I got involved. That's how I started my yoga journey. And so now my main focus, if you didn't know already by now, if you haven't seen it in my videos, my main focus, the 8 limbs. The 8 limbs of yoga. You can get lost in the information. There's so much information out there about yoga, right? So much information. When I first got involved, I was reading about all different kinds of yoga, different ways to approach it, different concepts, different books, so much information. Jivamukti Yoga, Ashtanga, Hatha, Kundalini. What do all these things mean? I mean, it was overwhelming, but I was enjoying it. I just jumped in head first. And then what I did was I said, okay, what is the oldest book? The oldest book that has a complete look at yoga. What's the oldest book that has the most complete view look at yoga? It's the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's like should be, and I've seen it in a lot of places. Should be everywhere, right? It's an awesome book. Should be in every single yoga studio. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I discovered that book, and then in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, right? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali has 4 parts. It talks about what yoga is, how to practice yoga, the benefits that come with yoga, and what eventually happens when you achieve a certain level of yoga, right? 4 parts of it. The second part is actual practice. Like, what do you do? In that second part, you have the 8 limbs of yoga. The 8 limbs of yoga: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, stavangani. Your 8 limbs of yoga. So powerful. That is what I focus on. That's what my whole life is wrapped around. I live my life according to the 8 limbs of yoga, to the best of my ability, because we all fall short, right? We all fall short of working towards being of perfection. Let me put it that way. We all fall short of perfection, and you don't want to be perfect, because you don't want to be perfect, because if you're perfect, then where else is there to go? When you're at the top of the mountain, where are you going? Where's the next step when you're at the top of the mountain? The next step is down. There's the perfection. You don't want to be perfect, and you can't be perfect. And so when I look at the 8 limbs of yoga, I know that, in the concept of reincarnation, when you're talking about reincarnation, it helps to ease me. It helps give me like, okay, it's okay, because I know that I have been working with these 8 limbs of yoga in my past lifetime. I'm working with these 8 limbs of yoga in this lifetime. I'm building. And then in the next lifetime, I'm probably going to be doing it again. I'm quite sure. My time is not finished in this plane. I have more work to do. So that is my main focus. My main focus is the 8 limbs of yoga, right? Yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And so I talk about those all the time. I had a yoga teacher tell me that it's really best to keep it simple, to find a concept, find something that interests you, and then stick with that and stay with that particular thing, right? And work that particular thing all the way out. So that's it. Thank you for joining me. I want to wish everybody a happy Halloween. And I want to talk real quick about Halloween. Halloween is big around these parts. We love Halloween. We've got the home decorated with some Halloween stuff. So, we love Halloween in this house. Halloween is a good time to pay homage and respect to your ancestors. It's the Day of the Dead, right? It's the Day of the Dead. So it's a good time to give homage to your ancestors. And a good way to do that is to get involved with a altar. And if you don't have an altar, that's a whole nother conversation that I'll probably get into. I might do another talk on altars, but this is a good time during Halloween is to pay some homage to your ancestors who have moved on, right? It's the Day of the Dead, so that's who we're really thinking about. We want to celebrate. It turned into the kids running around with costumes on and all that kind of stuff, which is fun. That's cool, But to know the actual origin or what it is really good. Um, I have a lot of Hispanic friends, a lot of friends from Mexico, and they are like Day of the Dead is their thing. They love it. And so anyway, I'm going to end here. Any questions, comments, and concerns? And I also like to put the question out again. I'll put this question out again to everyone. What is the most important part of yoga to you? What do you think the most important part of yoga is? Out of all the different concepts and all the different things, what is the most important part of yoga? So I'm going to put that question out to everyone. And until then, my friends, peace.